CSS width and mask width. Setting the width of a block level element will prevent it from stretching out to the edges of its container. Remember, we said that block level elements are always going to move from edge to edge of the browser. But if you set a width or a mask width, then you can control how they appear in the browser. So let's do this. So first, like we always do, we can copy everything we have here and create a new file called 015. Let's just say max width.html. So I'll drop everything in there. Also change the title to width and max width. Remove everything we have in the body. We're going to start afresh. Remove everything we have inside style. So we have our blank document. Also, let's check this in our browser. Max width HTML. Delete the block. So you see, we have a clean slate. Now, setting the width of a block level element is going to prevent it from stretching out of the container. So let's see this in action. Let's create some elements. So let's create a div. So I will start by creating a simple div. I will just say div. Okay. And I will give this div a class. I will say div1, and I will copy this div. Just make it so that we just double it. So I'll copy it and have div2. So what I've done is I've created two empty divs. They are nothing inside. Okay, if I check my browser, you can see nothing is shown. But let's bring them alive with CSS. So if I go to the style and say div1, so I'm targeting div1 now, and I give it a width of 500 pixels and also a border of 3 pixels, solid black. Let's see. You can see the first div is visible, right? So just to give it more shape, we can probably add height to it. So I'll just say height is 30 pixels so that we can see the box. It will be like a box. Okay, good. This is our first div. But let's put it to the center. So if you want to put this to the center, all you do is say margin auto. If I reload, you can see it's in the center. Now, let's work with this other div, but this time we will use what? We will use max width, so we'll see the difference. So for div2, instead of width, we're going to use max width. Save, and let's make the border yellow so it's different. Reload this. Okay, let's give space between them. So let's say margin bottom from div1, margin bottom from div1, and let's say 50 pixels. And this yellow is not popping out the way I want, so let's use blue. And let's reload. Good. Now you will be wondering, Precious, what is the difference? Max width and width. The difference is when you try to make the page responsive. So responsive is when we try to move to our mobile screen. So if I say inspect, okay, so I'm on inspect now, and I click this icon here that changes it to the mobile device toggler. If I do that now, you see what happens. Okay. If you see what happens, let me scroll this down. If I try to close it out, you see that the responsiveness takes shape. Okay. So let me make this like a phone, maybe 12 Pro Max. Oh, sorry. let's still maintain responsiveness. So what happens with this is 100%. Good. So what happens is you can see that the max width ensures that the element maintains a steady width, while width will always go with the page. You can see max width and width are different because it tells the element not to grow beyond 500 pixels. So on any screen size, this div will always be will always be 500 pixel, but the one with width of 500 can always remain with the page. So basically that's just the difference with max width. So if you want to enforce a width, you use max width, and if you want a flexible width, you use what? Ordinary width, like we've seen here. So you use width to give a width to an element, and you use max width to enforce a width. So the next thing we need to talk about here is positioning. And position, or CSS positioning, positions property specified by different types of positioning method. So you have the static, you have the relative, you have the fixed, you have the absolute, and you have the sticky. So without talking much about this, it is better for us to do it ourselves. So let's go back to our editor and create a new document called positioning. So 016 positioning.html. Then we can delete everything we have in style. Call this what it is exactly, positioning, and delete everything we have in the div. So you use this to specify how you position an element. So if we start afresh again, so let's say we create some series of divs, and so the first div is, we have a div with class. So let's start with the first one called static. Then let's create the class. So static. So static is going to be what? We'll say, let's give it a border first. Border 3 pixel solid black. And let's give it a height so that it pops out. It looks different, 50 pixel. So let's check our browser. I'll remove this. So we have positioning now. Good. You can see how big it looks on the screen, right? And this is because, like I said, this is a block level element and we're not using width on it. So that is why it is touching the two sides of the browser. Now, what we want to do here is we want to apply the first positioning. So we say position and static. If we reload, you see nothing happens, and that is because all elements are actually positioned static by default. So there's no need to even put that. They are all static by default. The next one is relative. So I'll copy this and I'll drop it down here. And I'll change it to relative. So let's create a new class called relative. And we can copy what we have in static and use it in relative. So position relative. And what does this do? An element with position relative is positioned relative to its normal position. So wherever it is going to be positioned relative to where it is. The normal position is right here in the browser, okay? But we can position it relative to this browser. And how do we do that? We can use any of the following properties: top, left, right, and bottom. So let's use left. So we can say left, and we want it to go 80 pixels from the left. If you reload, you can see it has moved 80 pixels from the left. So when you make it position relative, you can position it as much as you want. We can do it from the top. We can say top and 40 pixel. So instead of using margin, because it's position relative, we can use it to mess around with it. You see, we've moved it but downward. So that is just the idea of position relative. Then the next one is position fixed. So let's copy this div and I will drop it down here, and we'll call this one fixed. And let's copy this CSS. Fixed. So what can we do with fixed? With fixed, we are going to position the elements to a relative position on the viewports. So let me add a width of, let's say, 500 pixels so that we can see the difference. And I can change the border to blue, so it will also be different. Then we can use bottom and right to make this different. So because we want to position it to the bottom, so I can say bottom 0 pixel, and to the right, so bottom right 0 pixel. If we reload this in the browser, oh, fixed, okay, so height, oh sorry, position relative, so it should be position fixed now. So you can see it's at the bottom. So we've positioned this at the bottom. So you would have seen this a lot in different browsers or in different websites where they position things to the bottom. And now you can actually see it at play in your own your projects. So you can see this is position fixed. And even if we scroll this page, it's always going to remain at this position. The next one is position absolute. So position absolute works with position fixed. So absolute is position relative to the nearest ancestor. Okay, so ancestor in the sense that if I put another div inside relative, it's going to be the ancestor. Then I can use absolute on it. So this is the ancestor, and we can copy fixed and have one called absolute. So absolute, then position absolute. We can make the border green, and we can give it a height of 20 pixels so it looks different. Reload this page, and you can see it is inside of the relative div because now it is position absolute to it. So it is going to work in respect to how this one acts. Okay, now the last but not the least is the one called position sticky. So sticky, like you can see or like you can understand already, is going to be sticky. So it's going to be sticky at first, it's going to be relative at first, then it's going to be sticky. But the problem with this is that it doesn't work on every browser. Okay, it doesn't work on every browser. So the idea here is just to simply change the absolute to sticky. So when you have sticky, it's going to stick to the browser. But because of what we have here doesn't work so well because we don't have so much going on our screen, we're going to be using this in our different or respective projects. So guys, this may signal the end of the CSS series, and this is because I feel we've been going on a lot of theories, and the best way to learn is to do projects. So every other CSS things that we need to learn, we're going to learn them while we build projects. So this is going to be the final CSS lecture, but after this we're going to start a series of projects. We're going to be building some really cool stuff, really cool websites, really cool simple HTML and CSS applications, and you're going to see how to apply all the different elements that you've learned in this. So guys, I'm happy that you've been here with me. I'll see you in the CSS projects. Thank you.